Greetings and thank you for tuning in. It's good to be back after a bit of a pause. It's been a while since I've done one of these. Last time I did one, my book, Jagged Edges, Moving Parts, was not out yet. I read a couple of stories from it, but it wasn't yet out. Now it is. It's available as a paperback from most of your favorite bookstores. Check around if you'd like. You should be able to find it at a number of different outlets. Small local bookstores, chain bookstores, whatever you prefer. It's available as an ebook from Amazon as well. So I hope you check it out. I hope you like it. And if you do, I'd appreciate even the briefest of reviews. Would be much appreciated. It's always helpful. And thanks to those who already have reviewed it. I really do appreciate it. And just before I dig into it, I thought I'd read another quick story since I'm doing this anyway. But before I do, I thought I'd mention just a couple of other little promotional items. One is that I did a blog post recently for One-Legged Reviews. So I'll put a link to that in the description below this video. And then a couple things that are coming up I don't have links for yet, but I will add them to the description of the video when I have them. One is another guest post that I did, this one for Zach Madness and his In the Eyes of Madness blog. So that was a fun one to write as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing that go live very soon. And this week, an interview is supposed to go live that I did with Fanbase Press, and I had a lot of fun with that. I think it turned out pretty well. So I'm looking forward to sharing the link to that here and on Twitter and Facebook and wherever else, maybe Instagram, something like that. The story I'm going to read tonight is called Breech, Baby. And it's an unusual little number. Not sure what I was trying to get off my mind when I wrote this one, but sometimes it's the really odd little ducklings that I find myself developing a strong attachment to. But then again, I guess we tend to get attached to all of our little children as writers. So at any rate, this one, I guess we like, I don't know, I won't speak for anyone else, I'll just speak for myself. I like all of my stories for different reasons. There's things about them that have either special meaning, or I'm particularly pleased with how some aspect of them turned out. And with this one, I really just, I do like the oddity of it, and just the sense of vicious fun. And I sort of let my judgment off the leash, I guess, at least to the extent that my own judgment is revealed through the eyes of this character, Llewellyn. But enough said. Enough of my gabbing. Let's, although I'm going to be gabbing as I read the story, but let's go to the story. And it's coming right now. Breech, Baby, from Jagged Edges and Moving Parts. Llewellyn wondered if things would be any different after she was dead. Would these people still have dinner parties and not notice she was gone, the way they now failed to notice she was there? None of them knew she was scared to death over the pain in her belly. No one even knew it was there. Maybe it was a tumor, and one day it would burst open and get into the works of every system in her body, and she would lose the ability to function. Doris would still take delicate sips of her Merlot. Lucas would push food around his plate with a knife before loading it onto his fork. Ham would bore the company with tales he thought were some of the greatest ever told, but that were really just puffed-up scraps of wish fulfillment. Llewellyn hated the lot of them and wished her cancer would explode right there in front of them all, if cancer it was. At the first quiver, she'd yank her blouse from the waist of her slacks and expose the throbbing growth. That would be enough to get Doris barfing into the kale salad. Then, when the thing actually broke open and oozed its mutated contents onto the spotless white tablecloth, well, the room would erupt into chaos, and Llewellyn could die content. But God was seldom so kind about these things, mysterious ways and all that shit. She would have to wait this out, like the dinner party itself. The question was, why did she keep getting invited to these fucking things? And why did she keep showing up? They had to hate her every bit as much as she hated them. She supposed they were all sick in one way or another. Lucas was standing now, an idiot's smile on his dumb face. Who did he think he was fooling with his polyester getup? The sleeves of his sport coat intentionally a little too short, his necktie bunched up above the neck of his vest, although he surely would have called the tie a cravat and the vest a waistcoat. Did he want everyone to think he was some kind of poet? Not an intellectual, surely. "Okay, everyone," Lucas said. "I've got an announcement to make, and I want you all to be the first to hear it. You already know that Elizabeth and I have been pregnant for over 7 months now, and, well, there's something wrong." Beth sat beside her husband, her face ashen. Surely he'd told her he was going to do this. No, of course he hadn't. Selfish dolts like Lucas Harrington always expected surprise announcements to be well received by all. Llewellyn didn't include Beth in her feelings about the rest of the group, she realized. Beth was different. Maybe she had something to do with why Llewellyn kept accepting invitations to these goddamn dinners. The doctors can't seem to agree on exactly what the problem is, but the child probably won't survive unless they open Beth up early. See, it's adhered to the walls of... "Jesus, Lucas," Doris said with a mouthful of half-chewed sourdough. "Well, imagine how we feel about it. Anyway, it won't make it if we try to bring it to term, and Beth would be at a highly elevated risk for complications, even death, if we took it out now." Llewellyn rubbed her abdomen. "Come on, pop, you son of a bitch." "So what are you going to do?" Ham asked. "They're trying to talk us into a chemical bath that would slough the child out through the uterus, piece by piece. It would be the safest course for Elizabeth." "Oh, God, I'm going to be sick," Doris said before covering her mouth with a burgundy napkin and burping a little. Beth had stopped looking at anyone. Her head hung so low that locks of hair almost dipped into her soup. She might have been crying, but her body was still, so she wasn't sobbing uncontrollably, which she would have been more than entitled to. "But," Lucas went on without invitation, a false smile still draining all substance from his face, "I think I'm close to convincing Elizabeth that the proper thing to do is to force the birth now and then put the child up for adoption." He'd said it like he expected praise, maybe even applause, but Llewellyn only snorted laughter and shook her head, stabbing distractedly at some peas on her plate. "What, she decided she was cool with the risk to her own life?" Llewellyn said, nodding at Beth. "Beth, are you going to let this rim job speak on your behalf?" Beth eyed her with only the slightest raising of her head and quickly cast her eyes downward again. "Shit, you people are all fucked up. I'm not perfect, but Jesus Christ, I'm Tony Robbins compared to the rest of you. Why would you go through all this and then put the kid up for adoption?" Ham piped up. "I don't think you need to be." No, said Lucas. "It's a fair question, just a little clumsy. We think the hand of God is in this, frankly, that he wants us to give the gift of a son to a couple who can't conceive on their own." "Bullshit," Llewellyn said. "There's a chance it'll be born retarded if it survives, isn't that right? And you don't want it to look like you're aborting a child simply because you don't want a retard for a son. But you don't want a retard for a son, so you figure you'll pawn the thing off to someone else, again, if it survives." She could tell Lucas was weighing not only his response, but the manner in which he should deliver it. His eyes darted left and right as if he were a fish in the dark. "That's good," he finally said. "I admire your gall. It inspires me." "Good. I'm glad it doesn't gall you. What if Beth dies? Does that concern you at all?" "Of course it does. I wouldn't have mentioned the possibility if it didn't. But if we go with the Fine. I'll take your word. It's a risk you're willing to take." "Yes." "Beth, is it a risk you're willing to take?" Beth lifted her head, and for a moment she looked more like a queen than the bullied waif she was. Pushing herself back a little from the table with both hands, she jutted her chin and stared defiantly at Llewellyn, whose skin crawled with anticipation, for it felt as though Beth was about to say something momentous, possibly for the first time in her lonely life. But she said nothing. She stood, and the illusion shattered. The waif was back, and it cupped its hands to its face and ran from the room trailing quiet sobs. "That's a lot of interesting talk coming from an orphan shit like you," Lucas said, spraying spittle across the table. A nervous smile played across his drooping lips. His cheeks reddened. Llewellyn could have come up with no better example of why she hated the man than this childish and misguided display. His timing was good. She had left herself wide open to the jab, and Lucas lunged. But the remark was an overstep, chosen for its guaranteed shock value more than its appropriateness to the situation. It betrayed a lack of confidence that Lucas should have found embarrassing, But of course he didn't. He was a stranger to all manner of humility. "You're proud of that one, aren't you?" Llewellyn said. "It shows all over your jowly face. You're pleased with yourself for reminding everybody that I hate being called an orphan, because I'm not one." "Adopted," Lucas said as he brushed at his thin mustache with 2 fingers. "Same thing." Now everyone could plainly see what Llewellyn had been the first to notice. Lucas had no idea where to draw the line, and he was an utter hypocrite. "I should kill you," said Llewellyn calmly, but with meaning. "Oh, now, Lou," said Doris. "No, really." She turned her attention to Doris. "For the depth of his stupidity, I should scramble across this overpriced spread and tear his fucking eyes out. Who would care?" She looked back at Lucas. Would anyone in this accursed world shed a tear?" The ensuing silence wasn't broken by an announcement from Ham that he really ought to be getting home to tend to his cats. It wasn't Doris observing that the hour was getting late, or even Beth returning with a contrite explanation for her sudden departure. It was Lucas who shattered the stillness, and he did so with a single syllable. "No." It was uttered with such certainty, such sincerity, that the room had little choice but to fall back into uneasy silence. Lucas sat down as Llewellyn sprang to her feet. Pain, unlike anything she'd ever endured, clamped around her abdomen. She started to bow over, but the movement only made it worse, so she straightened herself and pressed both hands into the center of the pain. She could feel sweat beading all over her forehead and cheeks, then running down her chin and neck. Her skin felt hot. She pressed her eyes closed with so much force that she saw stars shooting this way and that. "Jesus, Lou, are you all right?" It was Doris. Llewellyn was incapable of speech. Something inside her fell, and the pain followed it. Jesus Christ! Wetness at her thighs, too much to be sweat. What then? Blood? No, too much to be that as well. She'd be passed out by now if it was blood. A surging pressure erupted in the region of her uterus. She desperately needed to lie down, but knew she wouldn't make it to the floor without injuring herself further. The table was the only solution. Without bothering to clear a space, she slid herself to the middle and worked savagely to undo the belt at her waist. Then the button and zipper. Anything to relieve the pressure. In a clumsy display, she tore the pants from her legs and flung them aside, nailing Lucas in the face without even trying. Finally, she was able to let out a scream, but it was swallowed by the din of the other dinner guests, for they had dissolved into a state of panic. Her eyes flashed open. They were all staring and pointing at the area between her legs. She felt something there herself, something moving her underwear aside from within her vagina, very gently. Then a tug, and the panties were ripped from her body, drawing blood where they friction burned along the waistline. She grunted through clenched teeth. Whatever was inside her now had the egress it obviously sought, and it proceeded with the same gentle confidence of its initial toying. But this time it wasn't just fidgeting. It was on the move. First, one slender black appendage rose into view from between her legs, crooked and spindly. Then a second, hairier than the first, emerged from her birth canal. They rotated and reached, as if testing whether the air was safe to breathe. Whatever they were attached to wanted out, and began to push. Hard. The others had stopped yelling, but Llewellyn took up the refrain. The pain was excruciating, as something far too big for her to bring into the world forced its way nonetheless into existence. 2 more insectile legs popped out, but simply draped themselves over her thighs. The last 4 came fanning out above her stomach before falling across her midsection and taking hold. The thing was using its extremities to draw itself out of her. In one final thrust, it burst free with a sloppy, wet sound, and Llewellyn heard one of the party drop to the floor. Doris fainting at a guess. Llewellyn was very close to unconsciousness herself, but she had to see what she had birthed. She hitched herself up on one elbow, then the other. The black jointed appendages atop her began to arc, pulling the skin of her belly together as the gigantic head of an insane, curious spider came into view. The thing quickly released its hold on her flesh and skittered over her leg onto the table. It seemed to assess the scene, its eyes searching the gaping faces of everyone in the room. Afterbirth clung to the arachnoid hairs that mantled its bulbous form. Lucas was the first to run, and like that, the spider's decision was made for it. With a powerful leap, it launched itself over the nearest chair back and dropped to the floor with a thud. Without so much as a beat, it was in pursuit. Llewellyn turned away smiling, the music of Lucas's horrified shrieks a lullaby that carried her out of this world and away from her last supper with these people, absolving her of the burden of explaining a most troubling delivery, and the recent nightmare she now believed had been much more than a dream. And there you have Breech, baby, ladies and gentlemen, from Jagged Edges and Moving Parts, my latest short story collection. And that's all I have for now. We'll keep this one a little bit brief, but there will be more to come, and I'll try not to make you wait quite as long for the next one. Thanks again. Hope you're hanging in there, and we'll be back soon.